Tennessee Wildman. The origins of the Tennessee Wildman go way back to the 1800s in McNairy County, Tennessee. One of the stories is that a circus freak showman somehow captured the beast and put him on display in a cage where everyone could see him for exploitation until it finally broke free. The appearance of the Tennessee Wildman is similar to that of Sasquatch, but more human. He supposedly has either dark gray or dark ginger hair, is about 7 feet tall, and is always accompanied by piercing red eyes. It is known to scream a disturbing war cry that can frighten anyone who hears it and has a horrible odor similar to the skunk ape. It has very aggressive behavior and may be the archenemy of the Sasquatch, often fighting for territory reasons. Not surprisingly, the Wildman possesses great strength, agility, and speed. There have been many groups of men that have gone out hunting for the creature, but usually they don't find anything or something traumatizing happens. The monster is known to have a strange obsession with dogs and women. Many women came out to say the Wildman had attempted to snatch them up and carry them away. It is suspected, however, that these attempts were always unsuccessful. The latest known Wildman sighting took place over 20 years ago near Elizabethton, Tennessee. Rob Phillips, along with his cousin, were on a night hike to Bee Cliffs. Through the rain, they noticed something strange in the forest. Everything had become completely silent. The sound of a snapping twig broke the silence, followed by a horrible, inhuman scream unlike anything the hikers had ever heard. The men fled separately through the darkened wood, with Phillips soon finding safety behind a tree. It wasn't long after that he spotted the Wildman clinging to a nearby tree, about 15 feet away. Rob heard his cousin break for the hill, and he followed suit. Phillips' account corresponds slightly with the initial tales of the Tennessee Wildman. He was described as about 9 feet tall, with red, beady eyes, a set of claws, and a horrible, pervasive stink that Phillips compared to the stench of a dead animal. It is unlikely that the Tennessee Wildman has lived almost 150 years in the Tennessee mountains. It may be assumed, then, that more than one of these creatures exists. Or could the creature sighting in the Bee Cliffs area be something entirely different? It wasn't only in Tennessee that this creature was sighted, since some reports also came from Kentucky. In 1877, a party of gold miners traveling through the Globe Valley in Caldwell County, North Carolina, encountered what they described as a wild man. Although they only got within 40 yards of the man, one miner claimed that this peculiar specimen of humanity appeared to be a giant 6 feet, 5 inches, with a funnel-shaped head and 2-inch-long dark hair covering his body. When he spotted the miners, he pounded on his chest before turning and bounding off into the woods with the speed of a deer. The party tracked him with guns drawn to a cave deep in the mountains, where they found bones of many animals scattered about, indicating that he had been living there a while. The most amazing thing about this story is how similar it was to hundreds of other sightings, encounters, and confrontations that supposedly took place across the United States following the Civil War. Newspapers and magazines carried their stories, reprinting those from faraway corners of the nation. They were very strange reports and remarkably similar. In 1896, Forest and Stream published a sketch of the Wild Man of Chilliwack, a Gruffalo-type creature with talon-like fingernails and toenails, tusks instead of teeth, and hair and a beard to his waist. 4 hunters encountered the naked man in the forests of East Tennessee, and after following him back to his lair, they attempted to seize him and haul him back to Cleveland, but the man used his brute strength to overpower the men and run. A posse later returned for the wild man, captured him, and sent him to the insane asylum, where, according to the report, he now reposes in comfort. A group of hikers found a wild man living in wildness and savagery in a crude structure on top of one of Pennsylvania's most remote mountains. When they attempted to communicate with the man, he could only grunt and wave his hands. One white man hauled into a New Jersey town by a hunting party swung through the trees like a monkey with a wild expression in his eyes, but he could only utter the phrase, "Give me some grass." Most newspapers described the wild men in similar terms. They were covered in hair, as fast as deer, unusually large, and hideous. They were not Indians. They were not African Americans. They were often described as white, if their race was described at all, but they did not appear to be humans, and if they were a degraded form of humanity. The people that encountered wild men responded with, at best, curiosity and, at worst, vile contempt. They almost always tried to capture him, and occasionally they killed him. The so-called wild man of Camas was killed by an axe carried by a group of immigrants through Idaho in 1883. After having caught wind of the presence of a wild man in northwestern Nevada, a group of citizens led a posse into his camp. Upon seeing the posse, the infuriated demon, a 40-year-old white man, took off running toward the horses, but members of the posse opened fire, chasing him back into the forest. Stories like these abounded. What can account for the flurry of sightings of alleged wild men in American woods at the end of the 19th century? The answer, of course, is complicated. It must have spoke to some deep-seated cultural needs of contemporary Americans. The label wild man was heavy with meaning. The wild man myth dates back to antiquity, and people could find specimens of them in countless circuses and traveling freak shows. P.T. Barnum popularized the wild man from Borneo, who had a thick coat of fur and was touted as the missing link between orangutans and humans. Wild men were the subject of popular novels and countless fireside stories. It was truly a national obsession. The label wild man, then, carried with it a set of expectations grounded in popular culture. When a person encountered a figure in the woods that could not be readily explained, his or her imagination filled in the missing details using this cultural reference point. Although it has taken different forms through the last 4 centuries, the wild man myth has remained remarkably durable in the Western mind. He has been cast in dozens of roles, beginning with the descendants of Cain and Ishmael. The Romantic movement transformed him from a despised antagonist to a sympathetic and even admired creature. In this form, he played Rousseau's natural man, George Catlin's noble savage, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan, and Rudyard Kipling's Mowgli. These writers used the wild man to promote a type of masculinity that was raw, virile, and unspoiled by the negative effects of civilization, whether it was materialism, moral depravity, or effeminacy. In short, they were commentaries on the state of culture during an economically and politically transitional time for men. The wild man who supposedly captured 5 members of Braxton Bragg's Confederate Army in Tennessee was reported to be one Bill Patton, who refused to join the Confederate Army and took to the hills to flee the Home Guard. The wild man of Shattusack Mountain, Vermont, was found to be Thomas Uhrmann, a Prussian immigrant who had been living off of wild berries, apples, and woodchucks for 5 months. In northeastern Ohio, a wild man who was captured after drifting into town one day looking ragged, tan, and hairy was one John Kinney, once an intelligent and highly educated man. He had been living in the woods for several weeks and was now, according to the Hopkinsville Kentuckian, violently insane. These men had chosen, as adults, to leave society behind and return to the wild. It would shape their public image,